Hey there, we're talking about well being and resilience and how women who practice mindfulness can begin to build just those things. And we're going to get to it in just one moment. Hi there. Welcome to Stress Talk Live with Marcyline. I am your host today, Marcyline Bailey. I am so glad that you've decided to join us this evening. Why? Because this is the place where we help women over 40 to live healthier lives through strategic stress management and solution focused self care. Again, I'm just glad that you joined us. A little disclosure. I am someone who tends to over prepare for everything. I over prepare. I just always go, it's a habit and I over prepare. I'm going to tell you today that I am not as prepared as I would like to be. I feel like my what I'm presenting to you has not been pulled together. So I'm just sharing that with you today. I mean, I know you've seen me stumble at times and not, kind of get my words all tumbled up. So I don't know what you're going to get today. My intention is to share how we can build resilience and our well being through mindfulness. And so um, I'm just telling you up front, I don't know what you're going to get in detail, but in general, that is my intent. Before we get started, however, I definitely want to remind you to like, follow, and subscribe to ML Bailey Consultants on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you for doing that. Also, if you'd like more information, please go to this link, the one that you see in the blue box, the blue rectangle. And as always, you can find more information on my website, mlbaileyconsultants.com. So, we are talking today about how practicing mindfulness builds women's overall well-being and resilience. So let me just talk about we're at the end of the month and I've been talking about mindfulness and I've been talking about it quite a bit. A lot of times when people think about mindfulness, they're thinking about things like breathing. I'm just going to breathe, count to 10 as I'm breathing. Or they think about, I'm just going to sit quietly for a few minutes and that's going to bring my stress levels down because that's what mindfulness does, right? It brings my stress levels down. It helps me to stay in my workplace and it helps me to get through this stressful environment. Well, mindfulness is a lot of things. And as you've heard me say before, it's more than that. It's more than just meditation. It's more than just breathing. Mindfulness is really a lifestyle that we can take with us. We can incorporate habits and develop habits that help us in our entire life realm, in all of the areas in which we move and live. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit today because as we develop a lifestyle that's built around mindfulness, it's not just about sitting on the cushion. It's not about sitting and meditating on the cushion every day. That is a part of it, but there's so much more. And I'm just learning, I'm learning what all of those other aspects of mindfulness entail. And it's amazing to me because as we begin to practice those things in our everyday life, it can make such a difference in our well being, and it can help us to be more resilient. Those waves that come at us, the winds that come at us, the torrential thunderstorms that come at us in our everyday life do not knock us for a loop. And so I want to just share a little bit about those things. And then um, before we end today, I want to take us through a little practice. Okay, how about that? So, the first thing I'd like to talk about is let's talk about well-being. Okay, let's talk about what that is really. When we're because when we talk, we hear these words often. We hear wellness, we hear health, we hear health and wellness, we hear well-being. So what does all of that actually mean? So when we talk about when we're talking about health, a lot of times people are talking about or referring to physical health, how you feel, what's going on with your physical body when we talk about health. There is also an aspect of health in which we talk about our mental health, right? But generally, when a person talks about health, they're talking about your physical health. When we talk about well being, we're talking about the gamut of what makes you you. We're talking about your physical aspect. We're talking about emotional aspect. We're also talking about relational, how you relate to other people, developmental resources that you have available to you, your work, your workplace, where you earn a living, your spiritual health, as well as environmental, where you live. And I'm going to go through these just kind of quickly, just to give you some sense of what each of those means, if that's okay with you. So, when we're talking about relational, we're talking about um, being able to communicate, being in a community with people that we have a connection and a belonging with, right? There's a sense of belonging in this group of people. There's a sense of intimacy that we have, or closeness. That's what we talk about when we're talking about relational as it relates to well-being. And of course, we want those our relationships to be healthy and whole, because when we're experiencing healthy and whole relationships, then that aspect of well-being is very good for us. It feels good. Another aspect of well being is developmental. It's how we improve upon the skills that we have, the strengths that we have. When you go into a job interview, you're often asked, what are your strengths? Or what do you see as your strengths, right? And the expectation is that we can identify things that we do well, things that we enjoy about ourselves, things that other people enjoy about us as well. But the developmental aspect of our well-being is the ideas around our skills, our strengths, our desire to add to our knowledge and our abilities. Um, Years ago, there was a term, lifelong learner, that came into vogue, and so and now I think it's just a matter of fact, lifelong learning. We know that when we are learning new things as we get older, it helps us to age much better because we stay alert. Our brain is able to learn new things, and it doesn't get static. It doesn't stop learning. It continues to grasp information, and that helps us. We've been told Things like doing puzzles, crossword puzzles, learning a new language, all helps us to stay cognitively aware and cognitively alert as we age. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the developmental aspect of well-being. But there's also a more concrete things. For example, resources that are at our disposal. Um, Money, yeah, money, how we utilize it, how we save it, how we manage our money, having the ability to do that, having money to do that, right? Um, Having goals in our lives, having values. Those are all our resources, right? Having good health, that's a resource. Having access to the things that help us to live, um, a home, a car to get to work, neighbors who we know and we enjoy. Um, all of those things, all of those resources, grocery stores, a grocery store we can get to in just a few minutes, food, all of those things are resources, and that impacts and influences our well-being. I talked about physical early on, our ability to move our body without pain, to heal from injuries, having access to medical care, being able to rest and to rest peacefully, having water, clean water, having food. I've pulled so many tomatoes off of our tomato plants. Y'all, and these are beautiful tomatoes. They're big, they're red, they're beautiful, they're not blemished. A lot of them aren't blemished. And I'm just so happy. And they're sweet, they're good. But having the ability to take care of our bodies and to strengthen ourselves. Emotional is another aspect of well-being. And when we talk about emotions, it's being able to meet the challenges in life without going to extremes in terms of our responses or our reactions. Work, having a meaningful job or having meaningful work that is fulfilling, that is paid or unpaid. You can be a volunteer and it's still work, right? You're just not paid in monetary terms. But also being able to have a balance where you're not spending all of your time doing work activities and no other time in the other areas of life that create well-being for you. But having a fulfilling purpose, meaningful work, that's what we're talking about, meaningful activities of work. Spiritual is another aspect, and that's of course, our beliefs that lead to our behaviors. When we think about our spiritual life, we're talking about or thinking about what gives us meaning, morality, our personal ethics, as well as our personal values, and how those are played out, how we act them out in real time. And then, of course, there's environmental. And we're talking about not just our home, but the environment, our neighborhoods, our community, um, the um, the quality of it, right? The quality of our air, the quality of our water, the quality of our roads, the quality of the trees and the grass that are around us. So there are all of these aspects are what we talk about and we think about when we're talking about well-being, because all of these things impact and influence our well-being: relational, developmental, our resources, physical, emotional, work, spiritual, and environmental. So as we're talking about um, our well-being, we also now should move into talking about how mindfulness can impact that. So let me move my notes so I can see them and see you. So, as you recall, I talked about mindfulness, and the definition that I learned through my training with Dharma Moon and Tibet House is that mindfulness is bringing our attention to the present moment and simply seeing what arises without bias or judgment. So, bias and judgment are really key. Spent a bit of time talking about that in previous episodes, and I will touch upon it again. Um, so, when we begin to practice mindfulness and mindfulness meditation in particular, we begin to recognize our own suffering as well as the suffering of others. And I bring that out because I think it's important for us to understand how that impacts or how that influences how we view our well being. For example, when we talk about, as you recall, when I talked about suffering, um, and I mentioned to you that the Buddha said that the absence of peace is suffering, and how I learned when I learned that, I was just blown away because I was thinking that is true. When we don't have peace, we are actually suffering. We don't have to live in a place that doesn't have food, water, or we don't have shelter to suffer. Many people are suffering every day because they don't have peace. They don't experience peace in their lives. They don't have peace as it relates to their relationships in their families. They don't have peace because they don't have access to the ability to resources that enable them to live in a comfortable life. They don't have peace because they're physically, their body is breaking down and they are in pain. They may not have peace because they are not experiencing balance in their emotions. They may not have peace because their work is taking over their lives and they don't have time for their family, their friends, or even themselves. They don't have peace because they don't have a spiritual foundation. They don't have peace because they live in an area that has polluted ground, polluted water, polluted air. And I'm not talking about in other countries, I'm talking about here, down the street from me. There's a Superfund site. There are many Superfund sites where I live. So people do not have peace, although they make X number of dollars a year. They drive fancy cars, they live in big houses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So having the recognition or recognizing our own suffering is something that comes out when we begin to practice mindfulness. But not only do we recognize our own suffering, we begin to recognize the suffering of other people. And that gives us an opportunity to extend compassion to others as well as to ourselves. And compassion, as I said before, is very key. It's a key component of mindful living because it's a key component to mindfulness. The other thing that mindfulness enables us to do is it enables us to recognize how everything is interconnected. And I talked about this again in a previous session. Everything is interconnected. If I don't feel good physically, emotionally, I'm not going to be good. And I may not be good mentally. If my work life is out of balance, then it's going to impact my relations, right? The relationships I have and the ability to nurture those relationships. Not only that, environmentally, if the environment in which I live is not safe or stable, then it's going to be very difficult for me to draw on resources from that environment in order to live healthy. So everything is interconnected, and mindfulness can help us when we begin to practice. And again, not only on the cushion, but as a way of life. It can help us to develop balance. It can help us to develop stability. And it can help us, as my senior teacher, David Nichtern, has said, it can help us to reach equanimity. And he defined equanimity in one of his blogs. In one of his blog posts, he defined it as a state in which we meet all varieties of experience with an open and unbiased mind. Think about that. To be able to meet whatever the world throws at us with openness and without bias, which is what? Another way of saying without judgment. It is what it is. It is what it is. So when we as women begin to practice mindfulness, we can definitely build, nurture. We can also build our well-being as well as our resilience. Because as I said before, whatever waves come at us, it may knock us down, but we can get up. Resilience. Whatever wind comes, we can just go with the wind, just like a branch in a tree, right? It helps us because we're not at any extreme. We're constantly in the middle. We can see that there is suffering. We can extend compassion to others as well as ourselves. We can also face it with an openness and without bias. So let's go into our practice. Told you I didn't know what you were going to get today, but let's go into our practice. And I'm just going to put up our picture just now. And we're just going to practice being still. I'd like for you to find a quiet place in which you can take a comfortable seat. Sit tall and just soften your eyes. Of course, if it's more comfortable for you to do so, just close your eyes. Breathe patiently, fully, yet gently and quietly, in and out through your nose. You don't have to change your breathing in any way. Just breathe naturally as you would normally do so. In and out, gently and quietly. Give yourself permission to do nothing. Give yourself permission to embrace this short moment of stillness. There's nothing at all that needs to be done. All you have to do is stay here, relatively still, and watch the breath as it goes in and out of your nose. As you watch the breath with an easy, relaxed, and open mind, place some small attention on what else the mind or the body is feeling. Notice your own discomfort in simply being present, doing nothing. Notice if the mind would rather run off towards the future, a to-do list, or planning. Notice if the mind would rather busy itself with thinking of the past, and each time you notice, acknowledge the pull or the movement of distraction. And then, with the loving patience, of someone you love, give your mind permission to rest. Help the mind settle. Be at peace. Be still. By guiding towards awareness of body and breath without thinking of breath, present with the breath, without thinking of body, present with the body. Feel into breath and body as you let the mind rest back. Allow for the mind to feel spacious, open, and at ease. Allow the mind to drop into the joy, the bliss of no longer needing to do, the bliss of simply being. Not doing includes no longer fighting against the movement of the mind or the rising thoughts. Allow the mind to move and the thoughts to rise, to simply be. You need not chase them. Distraction will arise, but there's nothing to do other than notice, acknowledge, and love. You'll find yourself again in the spaciousness of presence with the body and with the breath. Feel into the preciousness of this moment, this relative quiet, relative stillness. Recognize its beauty with your whole body, the freedom in resting back, the spaciousness in stillness. Give yourself permission to stay right here for as long as you'd like. There's nowhere to go, nothing to do, nothing more worthy than this. Just watching, noticing, being present with your body and your breath. Give yourself permission to be still. Thank you for joining Stress Talk Live with Marcyline today. We'll be back next time. We look forward to seeing you then. As always, take good care.